What is one sign a woman may be outgrowing an old version of herself, even if her life still looks successful on the outside?
Apathy, going through the motions, feeling like yesterday you loved whatever it is that you're doing, and today you're kind of like, or that might be, you're gradually over time realizing that you don't love what you're showing up for anymore, but you keep showing up because, again, it's that conditioning and not wanting to quit. And you just keep thinking, well, if I just keep trying harder, it'll get better, it'll improve. Not that perhaps that you might need a change or have the opportunity to make a change or the privilege to make a change.
Welcome to On Second Thought with me, Jackie Pfeiffer, a podcast for ambitious women and mothers who built a life doing everything right and are now questioning whether it's actually the life they want to keep living. Maybe nothing is wrong. You're not unhappy, burned out, or falling apart. You're grateful for what you've built, but still honest enough to admit you may want something else. This show gives you permission to question your life, get clear on what you want next, and explore a different direction without blowing up everything you've built. Because sometimes creating the life you want starts with one honest realization. On second thought, I want something different.
Dr. Susan Miele, welcome to On Second Thought. I'm so excited that you're here. You are my first interview. I don't know if you're going to be the first episode or not, but probably because you should be. And I'm excited to walk through your life a little bit and talk about, on second thought, what if I want to do something different with my life? That's kind of the theme of this. It's like,
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Wonderful
that's,
to be here.
yes. All right. So thank you for being here, and let's get into my rapid fire questions. Okay. Answer in one sentence, if you can. I know that might be a little hard, but all right. When you think about women in midlife, what do you think is the biggest reason so many start questioning who they are or what they want next?
I think it's because we are conditioned to sort of go in one direction and be able to handle all the things. And then when we start not being able to handle all the things, we start questioning ourselves instead of the construct in which we're operating.
Yes, 100%. Great answer. What is one sign a woman may be outgrowing an old version of herself, even if her life still looks successful on the outside?
Apathy, going through the motions, feeling like yesterday you loved whatever it is that you're doing, and today you're kind of like, or that might be, you're gradually over time realizing that you don't love what you're showing up for anymore. But you keep showing up because, again, it's that conditioning and not wanting to quit. And you just keep thinking, well, if I just keep trying harder, it'll get better, it'll improve. Not that perhaps that you might need a change and want to, or have the opportunity to make a change or the privilege to make a change.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we'll talk a little bit about the fact that, like, you can change your mind, actually. What is one thing women should give themselves permission to explore more often?
I think interests outside of their core responsibilities. So I think because especially women who have full-time careers at the C-level like you do, and you have a family, there's very little time to do anything else. So we end up between taking care of our family, our jobs, our house, and all the other responsibilities, we really end up having very little time to explore outside interests or possibilities. So that's, I think, why a lot of women just, again, stay on that conveyor belt of like, here's where I got on, and like, I'm not getting off now until, my kids are in college, or when I'm an empty nester, my kids graduate from college. Like there's always, I think a lot of women I know just put off the whatever it is they're interested in because in the service of their families or their children or their significant others or their aging parents. Like we have so much other responsibility and then, we feel selfish, or we're called selfish or irresponsible if we decide to go a different path. So I think that's it.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. When I was reading your book, and as I was preparing for this and like thinking about all the years that we've known each other, I think I always knew this, but I think I'm finally realizing that like a lot of the things that you were dealing with, like I just finally understand it all. And I feel like a lot of my reasoning for doing this, even this podcast, is because I learned so much from you. And like, even though you had gone through so much shit and like you finally found your kind of like quote unquote balance once you started working with me, right? Because like all of your shit had happened before you even started working with me, really. And
Well,
so,
the first time professionally, I said, well, I'm never going to be a CPO again. I remember that really clearly.
yes.
Like I was like, I flamed out on that in a big way. It was good while it lasted, but I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. If I can help you, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. And I feel like, as I have progressed in my career and as I start doing things like this, I'm like, I think about you and the fact that, I don't know, you just allowed me to be who I wanted to be, what I needed to be. And I never really felt burnt out. And again, like having worked with you in 4 companies and known you forever, like I think I mean, that's a sign of your leadership, but also just, I mean, I was like a sponge. I am a sponge with you all the time. And I just think, I just realized finally that is a lot of like how I am showing up now is because of you. So thank you. Okay, so as a reminder, this episode is in particular for the woman thinking like maybe I want to do something different with my life. But before we get to the part of your story that I would probably call like the turning point, I want to talk a little bit about something that you wrote in the book, which is about how you grew up, how that shaped your life and the kind of woman that you became and the life that you built. So before we talk about what came apart, I want to like talk about what was already a little bit in motion from your upbringing. And so what did like, well, we'll get to the part about your upbringing, but the first question really is about like, what did your life and career look like from the outside? What was the version of you that the world saw?
Yes. So I would describe it, and I think I describe it a bit like this in the book. It was very performative. Everything was the way it was supposed to be for someone who is on a certain path, right? The first person in my family to go to college, the first person to sort of go into the white collar field and a leadership track. I wasn't a leader right away, but I became a leader fairly quickly in human resources. And then, of course, I made a decision to marry the person that I was supposed to marry because that's what everyone said I was supposed to do. So in my 20s, I was married to the boy next door. I had a great job. I was the head of HR for an unbelievably cool company that paid well and had endless amounts of opportunities. And so on the outside, it looked pretty much like exactly the way it was supposed to be. Like it was the story that I wrote for myself when I was in middle school. It was my story, though. Like that was not necessarily the path my family cared so much about. It was like how I was going to finally feel like I mattered, was to get on that track and prove to myself what I was capable of doing. Get out of Somerville. Not that Somerville is a bad place, but when I was growing up in the 70s, Somerville wasn't like the place you aspired to live. You aspire to move somewhere. Now people do aspire to live in Somerville, but that's a little bit different. So to get a college degree, to get out of Somerville was sort of like, okay, how am I going to do that? And then how am I going to feel like whatever I do matters? And then how am I going to feel like finally, perhaps I might be able to do that and feel like I fit in, which was then, to marry somebody that was the person that everybody approved of, even if he wasn't the right person for me. Mm-hmm. So and I mean, my marriage fell apart pretty quickly in my 20s, but it was almost like it never happened, sadly. But on the career path, I mean, I did that for 20 years. Like it wasn't like a short amount of time that I was on that conveyor belt. It was from the minute I finished my undergrad until I was in my early 40s and things really unraveled. So it was 20 years of progressively bigger and more responsible positions, bigger salaries, more complexity, more fun. I mean, I really liked what I did. I really enjoyed it and was very motivated by it, but it was very much like checking the boxes that, you know, what does a successful career look like? What do you acquire, right? It's all about acquiring, like the house, the car, the clothes, the people. There's this sort of in your 20s and 30s, you're just in this acquisition mode, right? Skills, responsibilities, people, significant others, children, houses. Like you kind of lose sight of it, right? When you get on that conveyor belt and it's very hard to get off because it's just like, that's the plan, that's the story, that's the narrative that you told yourself that everyone approves of. So off you go until you die, retire, or something else happens.
Yeah. We'll get into the perimenopause piece of everything, but like being somebody who is 39 and so late 30s, midlife, hopefully I'll live longer than 80, but I can see how women are my age just lose it, even without perimenopause. And now, and again, part of the reason for starting this podcast is to give people voices and give people permission to do something different, because the conveyor belt is exhausting. And so sometimes I think it's an age thing, where we've gotten to a point where things are in place and, we're comfortable financially with a family, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, wait a second, what did I just do? And I feel like a lot of your experience is like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, and I think one of the challenges or one of the opportunities we have is we have to rebrand the whole perimenopause. It can't be such a delineating point for so many women because it is truly just part of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can normalize it, both from a care perspective, which is probably primary, and then we can normalize it from a workplace perspective, then it won't need all this attention, right? Then, you'll get to whatever age you start having symptoms, you'll get the right treatment, and you'll just carry on.
Right.
There's no need for perimenopausal women to suffer the way they do at work, at home, with their health. So, maybe not in my lifetime, hopefully in your lifetime, for sure in my daughter's lifetime. She's 27. It will just be normal. It won't be like, stop the tracks. Well, I'm in menopause or perimenopause. Because to your point, women are going to live a lot longer. So 42, I was 42, you're 39 now. It's like it's more than half your life you're going to be postmenopausal, depending on when you start menopause. So we need to not make such a big thing out about it. I'll give you, this is a parallel example. I had my thyroid out when I was 19. It never occurred to anybody that I wouldn't take thyroid hormone. Know what would happen if I didn't take thyroid hormone? I basically would be non-functioning.
Right.
Right? You can't function without thyroid hormone.
Right.
Just like you can't function without estrogen.
Yep.
So, if we can just build that into the healthcare system eventually, then women won't have to feel like they get to this point, tipping point where they're having a breakdown, either because of what they've put themselves through or because of what's happening to them. It'll just be normalized and you can just continue on with life and it won't feel so catastrophic. That's my hope.
Yeah.
That's my hope. It just
absolutely.
It just feels like it shouldn't be well, first of all, it shouldn't be so scary, which now I feel like there's so much fear mongering out there about it. And secondly, it shouldn't feel like it's a make or break thing. It should just be part of your life. And it shouldn't cause you to have to. And something else might cause you to decide you want to choose a different path, a different career. But it shouldn't be lack of hormones or your mental health suffering because of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree yes, absolutely agree with that. This is a good transition kind of into the turning point in your career, in your life, when this started for you in your early 40s. And you just talked a little bit about how people usually discuss it as like a physical experience. But you and many others experience it as like an identity event. Like this is something that's happening. Like to your point about we don't want to make it a big deal, but like at that time it was, and you didn't know what was happening, right? So like, what started surfacing, and like, manage to how did you manage that?
Yeah, and I would like to think, Jackie, that my story doesn't happen anymore today, but sadly, it happens all the time. So that's part of my reason for wanting to help educate in this
Mm-hmm.
menopause in the workplace space in particular, which is like women, again, shouldn't have to face this crisis point. And for me, because I was only 42 and because that was a long time ago, more than 20 years now, it was easy for it to go undiagnosed. So I had a goal to be a chief people officer by the time I was 40. I arrived in the C-suite. I got promoted in my late 30s. And at the time, my daughter was only 18 months old when I took on my first chief people officer role. And I had been the head of HR. I had been a lot of similar roles, much like you, but I hadn't had the C title yet. So I didn't have that executive position with a bunch of other white men, basically, almost all, except for one who were older than me at the time. And, I loved that job and I was very good at it and had a great team and everything was moving along. And then my cognitive ability, my ability to perform and sort of up to my capacity started to really be challenged. So I couldn't remember things. I was really irritable. I was very short tempered. I couldn't sleep, which is often what happens to women. I had almost no physical symptoms. And if I did, I don't remember them. And they didn't play any role in any of the million doctor's appointments I went to. It was all burnout, stress. The job was too much. I was working too hard. And I did work hard for sure. And the culture of the company was very hard driving. The fact that I worked with predominantly men was really out of balance. It was shortly after 9/11, and we worked in financial technology. So there was a lot of impact to the industry. So it was stressful time. So there was a lot of other things going on. So one might easily understand why my diagnoses kept coming back as anxiety and stress. But remember, I had been doing this for a long time at this point, like at least 10 years in pretty high stress jobs, if not longer. So to me, it kept feeling wrong. It was like the diagnosis kept feeling wrong, but my performance kept suffering to the point where I was worried. Did I think I was actually going to get fired? No, not likely in that situation the way it was. But I felt like I wasn't living up to my own standards, and everything around it was suffering. My relationships were suffering. My marriage was suffering. My health was really suffering because I was I was self-medicating with alcohol because anti-anxiety and antidepressants didn't make any sense. And it was a very high partying, drinking after work culture. So that seemed like the easier route, which just further deteriorated my judgment and my ability to sort of understand like what was happening to me. That was just like literally throwing gasoline on a fire. So I had a really bad moment and broke down in a meeting, and it was like, I can't do this anymore. And I quit, which was outrageous. I mean, I was making more money than I was making like Wall Street money. It was crazy. And I was in my young 40s. We had a beautiful house that we I mean, we needed that salary. Like we had made a lot of decisions based on that salary, because in theory, I could have retired from that job if I if I didn't have that little setback. So I left, and it was a really big decision. It seemed really foolish at the time, but it seemed like the only way to save my health and my sanity, whatever was left of my professional reputation, and certainly my marriage. So it was like, I didn't feel like a choice at the time, but it was a very difficult decision. We had to make a lot of other decisions as a result of that, including selling our house and taking our daughter out of private school. And then I felt like, well, I failed, right? So I sort of bought off on the gaslighting that I couldn't do the job anymore, that it was stress. So then my career was derailed for 7 years. Like, it wasn't a short amount of time.
Right.
I didn't go back to the C-suite till 7 years later. So it had like a ripple effect. And again, I wish I could say that this wasn't happening to women still today. As a result, specifically of perimenopause, I'm sure it happens to a lot of women, specifically as a result of burnout and stress and taking on too much. But I wish I could say it wasn't happening as a result of perimenopause, but it certainly is, which is unfortunate. And we're not doing enough about it. Not yet, anyway, but we will.
And when you think about that decision, I mean, that was a huge decision. And then, very shortly thereafter, you had another tragic event with your house burning down. Like, do you ever regret, it's a strong word, but do you ever regret leaving that job?
No, I don't regret leaving that job, because I think if I had stayed, I was pretty good at it, but not as good as I became at leading teams, because I had a lot to learn. And when you're very successful very early, you're not always open to learning, especially if you don't have a good boss. And I didn't have very many good bosses until later in my career. And I had a couple really good bosses later in my career. I did have some good executive coaches, which were very helpful in that early time, but I didn't have a lot of good bosses. So I feel like I would have stayed in that role and probably been like, got really caught up in like I would have stayed on the conveyor belt, right? I wouldn't have broadened my skill set. I would have been very one-dimensional or two-dimensional, right? It was like work and raise my daughter. And that would have been it. So I wouldn't have explored and done all the things that I did in that 7 years, and found a much more holistic's not the right word.
Like fulfilling?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just a more full life where I, became very much involved in a nonprofit that means a lot to me. I got a doctorate. Getting a doctorate is a funny word. I became a PhD, which is how I think about it. And work became my identity. It no longer only identity. It's like before my perimenopausal breakdown, it was like work was my identity. And my ambition and my performance and my purpose were all kind of the same. And then I was a mom. And I was a mom and a sister and a daughter and a wife and all those other things. But those were just things that I easily did.
Yeah.
My primary identity was as the chief people officer in that particular company. And it got to the point where I thought the company wasn't going to survive without me. I got so caught up in it. It was like I couldn't see the forest through the trees, right?
Yeah.
And I have an article coming out sometime soon. I wrote it a while ago, and my coach said to me, "The last time I checked, your door doesn't say CEO." And I was like, "Oh, right."
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But it became so important to me that I kind of lost the plot.
Yeah.
So in many ways, I guess, if it's possible to be grateful for that 7 years. The first couple were really not anything I'm particularly grateful for, but it started to get better after that. So I feel grateful that I was sort of thrust into having to make a decision. Although I've seen lots of women who who don't leave. I mean, I'm sure you can think of some that you've worked with who don't leave, and then they isolate themselves. They become less effective as a leader. They become the kind of women that other women don't want to work with. So I'm glad I saved myself from that. Whether I did it consciously, I didn't. It became an unconscious result of that journey, but I'm very glad that that's how I ended up coming back to my second chapter as a chief people officer, which is when I got to work with you.
Yes. Okay, so we just talked about, what did we just talk? We just talked about you leaving your big job that you really liked, but you were struggling, and then your house burned down.
Yes.
I remember that personally because you borrowed my car. But like you wrote in the book, all that remains is me, everything else is gone. And I started crying when I read that, because you've talked about this with me many times, obviously, but never so vulnerable like that. Like, it was always just matter of fact when we spoke about it. And of course it's a book, but like, how did you not, if we take the emotion out of it a little bit, like, when did you recognize that about how you were feeling?
Well, that immediate thought was like that night when I knew that the house was going to be a total loss. So my brother-in-law is a firefighter, which I talk about in the book. He came that night. He's like, you're not going to be able to go back in that house. Because even though I was watching it, I was still like, this is going to be okay, right? You hear all the time people have fires and they recover from them. But he was pretty clear that this was going to be a total loss and the house would be condemned the next day and boarded up and we would never go back in it. And he was right. So I was in my pajamas, which is pretty much all I had, although I did grab my BlackBerry, which is, has its own story because they were so important back then. Different than cell phones are today, but not different in other ways. So I had my wallet and my BlackBerry, and basically that was it, in my pajamas. And Allison was in her nightgown, didn't even take her Huggies or any of the things that there just wasn't time, which that's one of the things I've learned about fires, which is there is no time. So if you have a fire, don't hesitate because they move, they double in size every 30 seconds. So within, just a short amount of time, the house was completely on fire. So it was a little less than a year after I left my job. And this house was we had downsized and moved to a more affordable community so that Allison could also go to a small public school. And we only lived there for 12 days. And then everything was gone. And so much of my outside perception to one of your earlier questions was, okay, if you didn't care about what a CPO was, which back then, right, not a lot of people necessarily cared. Certainly not a lot of my family cared what the distinction was in my job. It was, my father used to always say, I don't really know what she does, but she has a big job.
Yeah.
So if you didn't care about this distinction, you could see the outward measure of success, right, was if you didn't care that I had achieved executive level by the time I was 40, you could see, I was still striving to matter and feel like I was important. So we had a beautiful house and we had beautiful things and we had curated, all these collections of pottery and this family to dining room and all this stuff because it was part of the package, right? It was part of the package, just like the clothes were part of the package, just like the red Prada pocketbook that I talk about was part of the package. It was all part of this identity that I created for myself as successful, executive, educated. I had a master's at that point. It was all part of the package. So that first part went fast, right? Career went almost overnight. It wasn't like if I had thought at all about that decision I made to resign, I probably would have eventually talked myself out of it. So when I messed up that presentation and had like a mini breakdown in the bathroom at that hotel for that offsite, I decided that day I was going to quit the next day. Like, no, I didn't give anybody any time to talk me out of it. And I didn't tell anybody. The only person I talked to was Ken. And the next day I went in and quit. So that happened really quickly, even relatively speaking. So then I had 6 or 8 months to like sell the house and downsize and get ready to move to this new house, which was like theoretically a new beginning. So it was less than a year. And then that was gone.
Right.
So, and my health was still gone, although that at the time got like little attention, right? Because I was so used to, again, as so many women are used to, just pushing through. Like you just push through, right? You have your babies, you go back to work and you get up in the middle of the night and you take care of them, and then you go to the gym at 5 a.m. Like I was so used to pushing through that the fact that my health had deteriorated and that by now I knew I was in menopause at 40, almost 43, that was like secondary. I was still like, no job. Oh shoot, now I have no outward markers of success. Like nothing, no car, nothing. Like, no bag, none of my jewelry, like none of those things that I could at least fall back on and be like, okay, so I might not have a job, but I still have this nice house and a nice car and a nice bag. And like, I'm still like, okay, like I'm okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm okay. I mean, much of that I was telling myself as well as much as anyone else. And then when that was all gone, I was like, I mean, I write about this in the book. I mean, I had to borrow my friend's underwear. Like I didn't have anything. Like the next day I was standing in her jeans, her everything, and I was like, this is so crazy.
Yeah.
Like I was like, what do I do now? How do I possibly build back? I had no reserves. Like I had nothing. My health was suffering. I had no job. I mean, financially we were kind of out, we had stretched ourselves to do what we were doing. So it was like first time I really understood what it means to have an identity crisis, like fully. Like I was so clear about my identity from such a young age, like where I was going. I did well in that. Was my first measure of success was academics, right? Doing well in school. Second was not being any bother, like don't be a bother. I was a middle child, take care of yourself, easy, go get a college degree, marry the right person, like just do all the things and it'll all be fine. So this is the first time, and I kind of wrote that story and followed that script along. And, getting divorced in my 20s was a little bump, but relatively speaking, didn't really, I came back from that pretty quickly because it was like such a not important part of my identity at that time. And I didn't have any children at the time and all of that. So then it was like, now I have a full-on identity crisis. Like the quote, I mean, it was like, who am I now? I don't have any, I have to go buy a whole new wardrobe I don't even have any money. I didn't even have a car. I was like, how do I rebuild from nothing?
Yeah.
It was like, I didn't know where to start. Like it was so overwhelming.
Where did you end up starting? After things had settled a little bit, where did you end up starting to get to the next phase?
I think I write about this a bit in the book, and I think it's important for people that it's one of the theories that I write about, which is called possible selves. And I think it's a really important, there's several theories in the book that I particularly think are important, but possible selves is one that I feel like is really important because it's part of identity theory, but it really is the piece around exploring things that may or may not work for you, right? It's like opening that optionality, like that you can try things and you can try them on. And if they don't work, you can move on. It's like, I didn't get that until I was well into my 40s. Like I was like, oh, okay, well, I liked consult. I went into consulting eventually. I really liked it, but I didn't love it. So I was like, I'm not, I'm not married to consult. Like I can go do something else. Like, and so it felt like I was wandering around a bit for that 7 years, but really I was trying things on and keeping the things that worked and letting go of the things that didn't work. And what didn't work anymore was, as much as I love being a chief people officer, I didn't want to do it the way that I had done it the first 10 years or so. I didn't want it, to be my primary identity. I didn't want my ambition to be confused with my purpose. And I wanted to be more human about it and less performative, less of like a mask. Like I wanted to integrate all of the things I had learned into being a chief people officer the second time. So that was like a huge opportunity. And if I hadn't had those 7 years, I wouldn't have learned all those things. And I don't know if I would have gone back or not. But when I finally did go back, I was able to bring a whole different set of skills to being to the second half of my career than I had done the first time.
Yeah. And when you talk about possible selves, I think that's actually, we'll get to a section on like what can people take away from this and what are some things people can do if they're feeling like they're in a similar situation. But did you do that research for your book, or did you do that research back then in at that time to figure out how to get out of your crisis?
Yeah, no, I did not do that research to get out of my crisis. I learned that was the theory that applied to that 7 years when I was writing my book. And I had learned a lot about identity when I wrote my dissertation, and certainly getting my or at least enrolling in fielding. I didn't finish my PhD until I was well into my second chapter as a chief people officer. But I started it in that sort of wandering period, that exploration of possible selves period. And what that gave me was that like a framework around theory and how theory can help us all, right? By recognizing there's different ways to look at things, and we can use theory to help us feel not alone and not isolated. It's like going to therapy when someone verifies oh yes, that's very normal. You're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Theory can help that too. And it can help in a way that is like self-study. It's like, oh, if I read it, and a lot of people, I hadn't read one of the theories I didn't love was like, I didn't love a lot of management theories and leadership theories. Like even in spite of my passion for learning in school, I always found those to be very shallow. When I really got into like philosophy and yoga and understanding all of that in depth, I was like, oh, this is going to help me to be a better person.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to learn more about myself and how I ended up on the conveyor belt that I ended up on.
Yeah.
And now that I am off of the conveyor belt, how do I avoid going back, right? So I write about this a lot in my Substack. The first couple of years, all I wanted to do was go back, right? Like, I just wanted to go back because I was like, I want to go back to that job. I was good at it. I had a good salary. I could count on the benefits. I want to go back to the house and the clothes. And like, I just kept trying to find my way back. And until I really realized that there is no such thing as going back, you have to go forward. I was struggling. And then once I was like, oh, there is no going back. I have to start here and go forward. And that's the other theory I think that's sort of runs through the whole book, which is we write our stories at a young age, and we have a very hard time. And this goes across genders, across ages. We have a hard time letting go of those stories. And part of it's conditioning, part of it's society, part of it's family, part of it's ourselves. Like there's a lot of reasons why we say, oh, no, I'm just going to keep doing that thing because I don't want to. In my case, it's like, I don't want to try to explain it. Like, why are you getting a PhD? I don't need to like I was always trying to explain why I was doing the things I was doing. And instead of just being like, I'm just exploring a possibility. Like, do I want to be a professor? I love academics. I feel good when I'm learning. Like I always felt like I had to justify what I was doing, either societally or family or so. Once I was free of the story that I was going to get back to that C-suite path and get back on that conveyor belt. Once I was free of that, I could do whatever I wanted to do within reason. I obviously have responsibilities.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really able to. I had to, I mean, you can't live in the Boston area very easily without having two salaries. So
I know.
I had to go back to so I had to figure out a way to find a way back to something that was meaningful, but it wasn't going to be going back on the path. And I had to rewrite the story. So that's called narrative identity. And it's the one that messes people up probably the most in my experience because it's hard to let go of the story. Right. And it can happen when people get divorced. It can happen because of illness. It can happen because of job loss. I can think of someone we know very well who it happened to when he lost his job. It can happen for a lot of reasons, right? It's not just menopause, which is why, and when I originally started writing the book, I wanted to make sure that I was clear that this wasn't just about menopause. It happened to be it was my reckoning with identity. And it is a lot of women's reckoning with identity, but a lot of other things cause us to have a reckoning with identity. And we can either choose to face them and go forward, or we can struggle. And I've seen so many people struggle we'll just use the job loss one. I lost my job and I can't get another job that gives me that same status, that same salary, that same sense of importance. And now I just don't know what to do. And some people stay stuck like that. And they stay stuck holding on to their story until it no longer supports them. And they don't find a new story. Maybe a new story eventually finds them because it has to. With like friends who have gone through divorces and they were not divorces that were initiated by them. And it's like, oh my God, how do I let go of this? My story in my mind was I was going to be happily married to this person for the rest of my life. And now that's gone. And all I want to do is get that back. And really, the possible selves gives you the tools to rewrite the story with different outcomes. So they're very connected. Narrative, identity, and possible selves. There's a lot of other theory in the book, but those two are very connected. And possible selves is the one where you also look at the things you don't want to do. You're like, I don't want to define myself by my job. I don't want to define myself by my pocketbook. Although I still miss that pocketbook. No. So I don't want to define myself by all these external markers. I need to find out like what's really gonna give me energy and purpose for this next chapter. But it's, I wish people had these, like, it's like what really good coaching and therapy helps people with. Two different things: therapy on the personal side, coaching on the leadership side. But if people really do well in those opportunities, they can do this work themselves, but it's so infrequent. We get so stuck.
I feel like that's doing therapy and getting coaching. I think like 2023, I was getting both. I was doing both. And I think that was the year, like 2023, 2024 were instrumental years for me in decision making, things that I wanted to do with my life. And I totally agree with that. And when you were talking before about, people have their story, like that the story that they write early on in their life. And you were talking about how you hate having to explain yourself or like rationalize why you're doing something or not doing something. And I think that is the ability and the choice that we get to change our mind or do something that we originally said we didn't want to do, or are doing something that seems completely outside what other people expect us to do. That is like a core theme of not only this podcast, but currently my life. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think it's really the fear of people's opinions that cause people not to make choices or not to rewrite their story? Like, what do you think it is that people are not really able to get out of that stuckness of like rewriting their story?
I think that was a big part of my story because I was raised with a lot of Catholic guilt. I don't think that necessarily is a lot of other people's stories. I think it's more multifaceted than just the society piece or the family piece, right? For me, it was family, feeling like I always had to explain myself to my family why I was choosing a different path than a lot of my family members might have chosen. But I think it's attachment to the story and the identity. And identity is so, we're sort of fully formed our identity in adolescence. So like if you think about all the noise, like all the baggage you have when you're 12, 13, 14, and you're like trying to make a plan that's theoretically you're going to be this person for the rest of your life. Like I think we get very attached to that for lots of reasons that aren't always societal. And then we get attached to the outcomes of that, right? We get attached to the big salary. We get attached to the beautiful house. We get attached to the traveling and the things like we get attached to those outward measures of success. And then we can't imagine what life would be like without them, right? So then how do you continue? You have to stay on the conveyor belt, right? Or it's ego, right? It could be simply like ego drives that. Like I see this a lot with executives who don't want to, who are my age and are like, I can't retire. I don't know what to do without this job. And I'm like, well, that's kind of sad.
Right.
Like to be not very dimensional, that the only way you define yourself in your 60s is by your work is like, it's so free. So anyway, this is not a very articulate answer to your question, but I think it's a lot of things. I think it's partly our own upbringing. I think it's partly could be our own fear. It could be our own ego. It could be our not wanting to let go of those things that, we feel like define us. So I think it's multifaceted. So that's why understanding identity from a multifaceted perspective is helpful because then you don't have to attach to one thing. You can find your own thing. You have to be what my thing is, or
Right.
What the store's thing is. Like it can be your thing, and you can feel like that's what's giving you energy and giving you joy. And other people could look at it and be like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't write a book if you paid me $1 million, Okay, well, then I appreciate
that's for you. That's your choice.
You don't have to be for $10 million right now.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because I think I had a lot of identity issues back.
I know. Your identity was your plan. What
was my plan?
It's like you make a plan.
Oh, yeah.
Well, right? Like you had at least 10 years mapped out, right? You're going to go to college, like you were very much like, and it was multifaceted. It wasn't one dimensional, but you were on a path and that was your story. Like you were determined.
Yeah. And then when I started working for you, I kind of lost my identity in like wanting to be you. I was like, I'm going to be Susan. I'm going to be a chief people officer. I'm going to do all these amazing things that she's done. And I didn't yet have a voice because you were my voice. And it's so interesting now, having not worked with you for several years, and I having my own point of view and having like my own perspective on things and knowing what you would have done probably versus like what I'm doing or what I decided to do is really kind of mind blowing for me, because I'm like, okay, 10 years ago, and like Susan would have probably gone down this path, but like I'm going down this path, and that feels like a complete identity crisis for me. That's just an interesting example of something that I've realized about myself growing up with you in my career, and also like now not working with you anymore. So that's been interesting.
We've been exploring different things, but keeping your sort of safety net, right? In the CPO role, like that may not be your identity, but it is a safety net for you as you explore these other things and paths and try to find and it may not be one thing. It may be this amalgamation of things that it's where you spend the next few years. And then once the kids are gone to college or out of college, you may decide to do something entirely different, right? Like,
yep, 100%.
You're not, necessarily retire from this on this path that you're on.
I really, really hope not. I really hope not. That would be actually that would be a failure. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about you going back to corporate. So like you, as you said, well, I don't know if this part was recorded, but you specifically said to me, sorry, honey, I'm not going back to be a CPO. When I had asked you for career advice and all that. And then you decided that after your career, like hiatus or whatever you want to call it, you wanted to go back. And I think that is it shows a lot of strength. And also I'm curious, were you worried about it? Were you nervous to jump back into being a leader and all that?
Yeah. I mean, even though I knew at that point that perimenopause had caused my performance decline and my sort of mental health challenges that led to my resignation, I still felt like a failure. It still felt like my parents were children of immigrants. They were born right after the Depression. So they were like, like you just figured it out, right? You didn't quit. Quitting was like, I had never quit anything up until that point, like without a plan. Jeez. I mean, I didn't quit without a plan. I had a plan since I was 14, and started selling, delivering newspapers so that I could figure out how I was going to put myself through college. So like leaving without a plan was like, that was the failure part, right? I didn't feel like I had agency. I felt like I was surviving. Like someone asked me once, was that an act of bravery, that resignation? I was like, I wish. I wish I could say that was an act of bravery, but it was actually like self-preservation, right? I loved my career, and I thought, what if it deteriorates further? And I do end up getting fired or firing myself because I'm incapable, or that the self-medicating with alcohol gets to the point where it's a problem, which luckily it did not. So I still felt like it was my fault, even though I knew at some level that it wasn't my fault. So that's what was keeping me from going back. It wasn't that I knew I had been quite good at it. I loved it. But what's keeping me from going back was this fear that the gaslighting, my own self-gaslighting, and the gaslighting from the medical community at the time, that I was burnt out, that it was stress, it was anxiety, that I couldn't handle that in a 5-year-old. So I had myself pretty much convinced that there was no returning, which is, I told you when we met, a nice version of the story. I'm sure that I was going to I was going back to school and working for Strong Women, Strong Girls, I think at the time. I'm doing nonprofit work and education, and that's what I was going to do. Oh, and I was going to become a yoga instructor. I was going to make a career out of Strong Women, Strong Girls, nonprofit work, teaching yoga and getting a PhD and teaching at the university level. That was going to be my sort of next chapter. But that was like highly impractical when I had a child that was going to college at some point. So how did I eventually decide to go back? Well, I got healthy, right? I got healthy emotionally and I got healthy physically. So the sort of combination of yoga and acupuncture and hormone therapy gave me sort of the agency back that I had lost in that process. So that's number one. That was sort of but that was not easy. You know, that happened over several years. Number two, I took a really low risk job.
Yes.
Like,
fair.
I did not go back to where I was, right?
Correct.
I went in with a CPO role that if I failed at, it would have not been noticeable because there was enough other things going on in that company
Correct.
that would likely take that company down, right? It was a venture-backed startup that was a little late in its timeline of getting a product to market. So it was pretty low risk. It was a real step down from the prestige and responsibility of a Fortune 500 company. So the combination of like overcoming my fear of failure was mitigated by going in at a fairly into a fairly low risk environment that I thought, if this doesn't go well, then I'll know that basically it is me and this is not the right career for me anymore. But I couldn't let it go because it had been such an important part of my story that when I started finally to feel healthy and I had all these new tools through yoga and acupuncture and through my studies, my PhD studies, I was like, and even through the nonprofit work, which adds a whole different level of leadership when you're leading in a nonprofit, which there's so much uncertainty. So I thought, well, I have all these new tools in my toolkit to apply to this new job. I didn't feel like I could fail, but I thought if I did, it was fairly low risk and no one would even notice, you know?
Did you purpose, I'm assuming it was intentional to do that, to go to a low risk. Yeah. And that was the first company that I worked with you at. Yes.
Yeah. It was purposeful and it wasn't, Jackie. I'm not sure anybody else would have hired me. I had been this was remember how long ago this was? Right? People didn't step out of their careers at the peak. I was at the height of my career at 42. People didn't just step out for a year or 6 and then say, oh, why did you leave that very lucrative division of a Fortune 500 when you're the head of HR? Menopause wasn't a great answer. Nervous breakdown was also not a great answer. So the answer that I told was the gaslit answer that I basically had a breakdown. Yeah. That was the only safe answer, even though that wasn't a great answer either. But it was certainly better than menopause because that was, if we don't talk about it now, we definitely didn't talk about it then. And then I can't tell you how many times people have said, I didn't know you were that old. I'm like, well, actually wasn't that old. I'm 42.
Yeah. Well, I think, people, because people assume the level of success that you had so early in your life, like they just assumed that you were older, which is.
Yeah. And menopause is an old person's
right.
thing,
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The combination of the two was and even if I knew when I resigned that fateful day that I was in menopause, I wouldn't have said anything. I worked with a bunch of guys who didn't even know what the kids got for Christmas. I was always annoyed at them. I was always doing all the wife jobs and the work wife jobs and the head of HR job. I was always I wouldn't have told them anyway.
It resonates.
Crazy.
Yeah, it resonates. I'm there now, actually. So I think this also gets to this idea that, and I think this goes along with the idea of the rewriting of your story, is that people make decisions and they think that they're permanent. And I think that a lot of what you wrote in the book and what we've been talking about now is like very clearly they're not permanent, and they feel permanent because you've told yourself like this is what others expect of me, this is what the norm is, and you want to be normal. And it's like actually uh the choice that I'm making today does not need to be true tomorrow. And so I'm curious, what did this experience teach you about the idea that decisions are not permanent?
Like I said, I wish that my decision was an act of bravery. That's what I really wish for people. And that's why I love seeing you and other women like you doing things outside of the sort of box or the norm, because that takes courage. And that's what I think we need more of, right? We need the courage to just, in the agency ourselves, to be like, I I did that for 10 years and it was great, but now I want to do something else. And that's like, we have to make that okay.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, for women who happen to face that choice because of menopause, it doesn't have to, that shouldn't be the reason. It should just be like, they get to choose. Like, I hate the menopause is like all or nothing, you know, it's like, it's all liberation or it's all like terrible. Like, just let's normalize it. So like when you eventually go through menopause, it's not another reckoning for you. Like you feel like, oh God, now I'm making all these decisions now.
I hope not.
To change it all up again. Like, it's like, I just want women to have more courage and more confidence in themselves, that they have everything they need. You know, it's sort of that yoga philosophy. You have everything you need. And you should trust that. And we just don't. And we don't for all the million reasons we already talked about. Society, family, our own stories, is that there's just, it's so layered that to free yourself from that is really difficult. So that's part of the reason I hope the book will, I hope people will see themselves in the book and be like, I can do something different. And there's no going back. There's only going forward. There's no going back.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like, yes, you've used two words that resonate deeply with me that I've been using a lot lately, which is agency and courage. When I was doing my brand design, the three values that are driving a lot of my work is freedom, integrity, and courage. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, for those three being what they are. But and again, like it is so important that we give people the permission to do the things that they want to do. And like, again, they have the choice, but they need to hear from people like us that are making hard decisions and have made hard decisions and want to do something different, that like you can do it. It's fucking hard. Like, don't get me wrong. It's hard.
And you know this from sort of knowing me in different ways. It's like, a lot of times people say to me, well, you're so lucky. I'm like, yeah, that was all luck. Sure. Fabulous. Like, and which part of it was luck?
Right. No. Literally. What? You know? Like, what part? Yeah. Yeah.
I was born with some brains. Is that luck? Perhaps. Perhaps the genetic blessing of having brains was luck. Because what I don't want people to think, Jackie, when they listen to this, is like, oh, listen to those two. They've been so lucky. You know, like, privileged, yes.
Sure.
Privileged, yes. We had roofs over our heads. We had educations, but we got to choose. We chose how we wanted to use those things. Now, I want to be clear. Some people don't have those.
Right.
Right. That doesn't mean that they still don't have agency.
Right.
But I also think that's part of what traps people, is that fear, right? Like, how do I step out on my own? Like,
Mm-hmm.
will I fail? How can I do it? What's the financial burden of this going to be? Like,
Yep.
there's all this fear. And believe me, I have plenty of that. But when you're sort of in a situation where it feels, I don't want to be dramatic, but almost felt like life or death, it was like, what's my choice? It's either I gotta make a choice. And
Yeah, and yeah, and some people fall they fall to the like victim mentality, and I think that's also a choice, right? And but I hear what you're saying, and I completely agree. And yes, were we privileged? Yes, but and I used to say all the time, "Oh, I'm so lucky that I got to work for Susan and I got all these opportunities and all this." And it's like, but I actually worked really hard to get to where I got, not just because I worked for you, but I worked my ass off and did a good job. And like, that's important.
we were lucky that we met,
Yeah, exactly.
but like the fact that you've made the career you've made has very little to do with me. You could have easily been not successful,
Yeah.
right? If you weren't as good as you are, we might have worked together for, a
Right.
few months.
Right. Exactly.
But no,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
the fact that we've worked together as many times as we have is a testament to your competence and capability.
Well, thank you. Yes.
Willingness to like work as hard, like and put yourself in really, unusual situations, right? Commuting, working, like
Yeah.
telecommuting before that was a thing. Like you've always been very brave. And those things, like that wasn't luck. That was you. And that wasn't me either. You have always given me too much credit. That was you. Like you made that happen. Because if you weren't any good, that would have been that.
Yeah.
We would have had a nice time and off you would have went.
Right. Here we
so
are, 13 years later.
Right. So like,
yeah.
I think, and what I have learned, I've heard from a handful of people from that first job back as a CPO. And, I guess I did do it pretty well.
Yeah. You built an amazing team. That was one of my favorite teams that I worked on. Yeah. It was a great team.
And they're in most of them doing really good.
I know. Okay. So I had.
That's the thing, purpose. That became my purpose to make sure it was no longer about ambition. It was about how do I help others achieve their goals, right?
Yes.
That became my purpose. And so that slightly shifted with the book in terms of like my purpose and helping others, but it's the same, right? The book is meant to help others sort of face their fears around identity. And my leadership was really meant to help people be who they wanted to be in HR. And if they didn't want to be in HR, to help them move on and find what they wanted to do and be who they wanted to be, right? Like I didn't want people to feel like this was their sentence, It's like there's lots of jobs there. There's lots of things people could do. They didn't have to make themselves into
exactly
good HR person.
Yeah, exactly. They had a choice. And I think about if I had worked for you before your kind of collapse and like the things that happened to you, I'm like, I'm curious if I could have handled your high, I mean, you always had high expectations, but you seem to, based on your book and based on what I have heard from you, it sounds like it was hard. It might have been different working with you earlier on than later on. What do you think?
Well, just think about who are like, well, is this going to make me look good or is this not going to make me look good?
So true. Okay. And this is actually something that I am learning and walking through in my own life and career right now is like, because I'm still the ambitious, go get everything done, do everything, execution. And I'm finally, I feel like, not worried about how I look, but I care a lot about how I help others show up. And that is its own kind of mind fuck for me, because it's like, can I do both? Can you be both? Can you do both? I don't know. Maybe, I'm not sure.
I think you can. I do think it's it's more challenging because I I mean, I think that the challenge is you have to meet people where they all are.
Mhm.
And when you're really ambitious and you're building a team to sort of fuel that ambition, it's a little different than building a team to work as a collective
Yes.
to so that everybody feels like they're thriving and
Mhm.
part of that. So they're different. And I'm not even saying one's right or wrong,
Mhm.
actually.
Mhm.
They're different.
Mhm.
And I think they can play different roles in your development. And how do you let go of, hiring a bunch of mini yous or mini me's? In my case, I'll use an example, versus really hiring people that are going to challenge me to be better, right?
Mhm.
I didn't particularly want to be challenged in my 30s. I thought I knew everything, And my track record suggested that I did know a lot and that I could rely on that until I couldn't. And so I didn't want to just rely on myself the next time around. Next time I got to really build a team, I wanted to rely on that team. But in order to do that, you have to let go, right? Because you have to let the team sink or swim,
Right.
and sometimes sink with them.
Mhm.
And you have to be willing to do that, which is growth. It's growth, and it can feel really scary. But it's more fulfilling than sort of dragging people along.
Yes, it is much more fulfilling to lead with the idea of growth and the collective versus leading with fear, because we both know, and we've worked with people that do lead with fear, and that is exhausting. It is stressful and not where I want to be. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and you find, and it's lonely because it's hard to really make real connections with people when you're driving towards just a goal and not really
Mhm.
doing that as a real, like, really together.
Yeah.
It can be, and our jobs can be very lonely to begin with. So it can be really lonely to be like,
Mhm.
so hard about it. It's like, and at the end of the day, like, is it really that important?
I don't know. Yeah,
You know,
maybe.
question I myself all the time, right? It's like,
Mhm.
nobody's going to die from this mistake, right? 99.9% of the time, you don't kill people in HR.
I know.
And
I was interviewed on a podcast yesterday myself, and we talked a lot about anxiety, and I think like we talked about the fear, and I think fear is such a driver, especially when you're younger in your career and you're still learning and you're still building your financial stability and like making sure that you are actually competent in the things that you want to do. And like the fear is so real, and the people that get through are the people that are brave enough to do it. So whether or not it's a conscious choice to be brave, or it's by chance that it looked brave, like,
I got much favor in my second half of my career because I wasn't willing to, like, put up with a lot of the stuff I was willing to put up with the
yes.
first time. Like, certainly I wasn't willing to sacrifice a lot of things,
Right.
whether it be work-life balance. I still worked very hard, but again, I wasn't willing to just be my job.
Yeah, and again, like that's how I learned, and that's how I've never really burned myself out from a job. I mean, I've maybe burned out from the other things that surround your life, but I learned that from you. You were a good role model, and I think that that's really important for people to have. So, okay, so one more thing that I want to do is I have like two things I want to do. I would like to
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I would like to know if somebody is trying to make a decision about what they want to do with their life, whether they want to make a career pivot, what they want to ask for a divorce, they want to have a child, they want to do something with their life. Like, what are the 1, 2, 3 questions that you would suggest they ask themselves to like actually dig deeper into, or things that they should do to dig deeper into themselves to get to some sort of answer and get out of that liminal space, which you actually talk a lot about in the book as well.
Yeah. I think the question of purpose is really important. Is like, what is my purpose? And does this next thing support that? Does whatever it is I want to do now support my purpose? So if my purpose is to help others to do what they want to do, to be really good at what they want to do professionally, is this next thing going to help get me closer to that? Or is it going to take me further away from that? And then there's a bit of a cliche question I always think about, which is like, well, what if I succeeded, right? Like we always go to like this isn't going to work. Like it's going to fail. But the second question would be, well, what would this look like if it was successful? Like, why? Let's not focus on the downside. What would it look like if it was successful? And how do I manifest that? So that would be second. And then I think third would be, so why not? And what if it doesn't work? You just try something else, right?
Yeah.
Like I think about how at this stage in my life, how much less interesting I would be if I just worked 40 years in HR.
Yes,
sure.
I know. Well, that's what I keep going back to is like, okay, I'm on my deathbed. Like, what do I want to be thankful for? Like, what do I want to be proud of? What do I want to be like saying, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm so glad I did that or whatever. Like, you don't want to be sitting there like, oh shit, I'm so pissed I didn't do that.
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know, I still could try a lot of things in the next 20 or 25 years or however long I have on this planet. But I feel like, well, why not? Like, and I have evidence that says, you can be really down and feel like all you have is your pajamas and no job and no career and no house and no clothes. And you can, if you put your mind to it, you can figure it out. Like,
100%.
Yes. And having brains definitely helped, but having agency is what really helped. And so, and also my default towards self-reliance actually helped too, right? Helps and hurts me all the time, right? It's like I default to that, but it's what helps me get out of that. It's like I had to find a way out of it. So I had to default to what I know, which is like, I know how to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And I know how to get done. So when I was like despair and thinking I'm never going to find my way forward, I was like, I had to reach really deep and I had to like do a lot of yoga and a lot of acupuncture and a lot of other things. But eventually I was like, my will was still there. Like it was, my will was not gone. And so choosing a different path, like I said, I wish it was courage and bravery, but now I have no regrets whatsoever. And I think my career in HR is still really important to me, but it is not at all the most important thing at all. Even though it's where I spent the most time for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so a few things that women are often told to value in their life, whether it's midlife or whatever. You tell me if you think they're underrated or overrated and why, briefly. Okay. Having a 5-year plan.
Overrated.
Yeah. Making a pros and cons list before a big decision.
I'm neutral on that one. Sometimes I think you can talk yourself out of things by doing that and not. I think you have to trust your instincts sometimes, and that doesn't always show up in a pro and con list.
True. Yeah, it's a little bit more objective when you do a pro con list.
Yeah. So I'm sort of down the middle on that. I think it kind of depends. I think like trust your gut, trust and verify, or maybe trust your gut, and the pro and con list helps you to verify it.
Yep. Staying in a role for the stability while you figure out what you actually want with your life.
I think that also is a right down the middle. I think it really depends. Like, I think you have to, like, everybody's life is different. And I don't want, like, I didn't have much to fall back on in terms of support or resources in many of my different pivots. But I don't know. I always knew, I guess when you're self-reliant from birth, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, and when you started, delivering newspapers at 14, like, I feel like, I don't know. But with kid, like this bit, like there's this, life's expensive, so it's like, I don't know. I feel like that's an individual situation.
Yeah.
But I encourage you to be brave, for sure. Be brave. Don't let too much time go by, because then you let the possibilities go by.
Yeah, totally. Taking a class, certification, or training before changing a direction.
Overrated. You're talking to the queen of education.
I know.
Overrated.
Overrated. Keeping your plans private.
Also, Jackie, that's a female thing. We feel like we never have enough credentials. I know a million men who barely made it through college who think they're smarter and better and more well-suited for lots of positions. And I'm like, I just need a little more training. I need to go get one more degree, and then I'll apply for that.
Yeah.
Some guy with no training will just walk right into.
Yeah, that seems right. Keeping your plans private until you feel clear.
I think that's overrated. I think talking to people is helpful sometimes, if you have the right people.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you have like your kind of board of directors that you're confident will give you guidance in some way that is helpful to you, I feel like, I think like keeping your plan. I've also gone back and forth on this one, because I've had friends and even myself keeping, like, I don't think many people in my life know about even this podcast. And I've done that on purpose. So I actually was going to go with underrated on this one. But I think also that is because for me, I have always been an oversharer. And finally, I'm like, maybe I need to keep something private for once. But anyway. Okay. So that was fun. I like that one. Okay. Final questions. If listeners leave this, listeners leave this episode with one thing to think about, what do you hope that is based on our conversation?
I think it's, it focuses on the identity questions, right? Who am I? How did I get here? And where am I going? So I think the third question is the one that doesn't factor in enough. It's like, where am I going? And I'd like people to think about where they're going and not just like be always on the conveyor belt or just following the status quo. Like, I'd love people to be more consciously thinking about who they are, how did they get here, and where are they going, and revisiting that like regularly so that they don't end up looking back and thinking, gosh, I wish I did something different, or I wish I tried a different path, and then it'll be too late. So I think that third question in the identity stool, the three legs of identity, is often the one that we don't think about enough. And maybe it does really, I don't think you need a 5-year plan for it necessarily, but it's like, is where you're going furthering what your purpose is? And you keep asking that and refreshing that and not getting stuck.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you would want to share with listeners before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered. I think that the only thing that I would want to, which I think we covered, is like, don't let the whole perimenopause, menopause story just scare you. It's just, it was scary for me, but that was a long time ago. It doesn't need to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more women like are talking about it and out there, the more we will help normalize it. And hopefully, like I said, if not for your generation, then for my daughters and for your daughters, that it'll just be like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll just so go through it as another part of life.
I think there's so many of us like my age right now that are not yet going through menopause and already having this like epiphany of like, shit, where am I? What am I doing with my life? And I'm really hoping that perimenopause doesn't bring me back to this phase. Okay, tell me where can everyone go learn from you, connect with you, follow your work? What's your Instagram, website, all the things? Where can we get your book?
Yeah, my website is susanmiele.com. So that's probably the best place because that'll take you to my book. It'll take you to my Substack, which I write pretty regularly on my Substack, and to my LinkedIn. So I would say go to my website and you can learn about my book and my current work around normalizing the conversation around more. I've really broadened beyond menopause to transitions and identity, but I still love to do education in the workplace around normalizing the menopause conversation.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this. I am so gracious to you. You just spent an hour and 41 minutes with me. And I'm so excited for this to come out. It is such an important reminder that we can like explore different versions of ourselves. And I think we talked about so many different ways that people can think differently and be brave and courageous and all the things to find their path in life. So I appreciate you and thanks for being on Second Thought.